All right, welcome to lesson 4 for chapter 5. We're going to go over community and ecosystem interactions in this lesson. So learning goal is that you'll be able to describe how the different roles organisms play in an ecosystem, as well as how energy flows through ecosystems. So it's going to connect a little bit of what we learned in 5.3, as well as bringing back some stuff from 5.1. So let's start with a quick review of some of the things that we talked about in lesson 1. This is incorrect. I think it was lesson 1, not lesson 2. So first was the levels of organization. So going from simplest to most complex, we're going to start way at the bottom with just a single organism. The group of that species, so every species of that organism would be the population. All living things within an ecosystem or environment would be the biological community. So that's all the different living species. Ecosystem would be bringing in those abiotic factors. Biome would be all the similar ecosystems, and then biosphere is everywhere on Earth where there's living things. And then this is the graphic that we use for that as well. So ecosystem is abiotic environment, all of these factors, as well as the biotic environment, which is the community, which is all populations, all the populations, which is one species each, and then down to the individual organism. So for community and ecosystem interactions, we're going to put definitions to some of those terms that we just talked about, those levels of organization. So to start out, a community is an assemblage of all of the interacting species of organisms in an area. That area is defined however that area is defined. It could be a lake, it could be a forest, it could be an ecosystem, a biome, whatever it is. Community is all the living creatures in that area. An ecosystem brings in an ecosystem is a defined space in which interactions take place between a community with all of its complex interrelationships and the physical environment. So we talked about all those interrelationships in the last lesson. Physical environment is all of the abiotic factors. So the water, the pH of the water, the temperature, the weather, the rocks, all of those things. All right. So for us to truly understand ecosystems, how they're shaped and molded and all of the things, we're going to talk about a keystone species. So keystone species play a critical role in the maintenance of specific ecosystems. And they get their name because this is a keystone in an arch. So without this stone, if we took that stone out, the entire arch would collapse. Just like with keystone species, without that species in that ecosystem, the entire ecosystem would look incredibly different. That keystone species helps keep it together. So for example, when bison are present in American tallgrass prairie ecosystems, they increase the biodiversity of the site. When those bison are not present, biodiversity goes down. The ecosystem is less stable. So it's important for us to understand those keystone species. So we're going to talk about the different roles in the ecosystem for 3 broad categories. So we have producers, which are organisms that are able to use sources of energy like the sun, to make complex organic molecules from simple inorganic substances in their environment. That would be, for this example, our trees. So producers photosynthesize, or for most of the areas that we'll talk about, they photosynthesize. All right, consumers are organisms that require organic matter as a source of food. Anything that eats something else, consumer. So raccoons, us, we are consumers. We have to eat other things. Decomposers are going to be your little mushroom guys down here. They are organisms that use non-living organic matter as a source of energy and raw materials to build their bodies. So consumers can then further be divided into categories based on what they eat and how they obtain their food. So primary consumers, primary is like the first level right above producers. They're herbivores. They eat plants as a source of food. So this deer right here, herbivore, eating those plants. Secondary consumers or carnivores are animals that eat other animals. So owls eat other animals. And then omnivores are kind of in the middle. So they consume both plants and animals. So secondary consumers can, they do eat meat, but if they also eat plants occasionally, then they would be considered omnivores. And then to touch back on decomposers. So decomposers use non-living organic matter as a source of energy and raw materials to build their bodies. And since they carry on respiration, they're extremely important in recycling matter by converting organic matter into inorganic matter. So as things die, they help decompose them. So they take what was a once living thing that is now non-living, break down all of that material, and give it back into the ground as nutrients to then support future animals, organisms, plants. All right, so you can pause and take a look at this if you would like, but this is an example of all the different categories, major role or action, and then examples of each one of those. So the big thing I want to cover in this lesson is the energy flow through the ecosystem. So we know how we organize our the natural world around us into those different layers. We know that the ecosystem is diverse. We have living things, we have non-living things, and we know, hopefully now, that the energy originates with the producers. So the producers are photosynthesizing, and then the energy goes up as we go up from primary consumer to secondary consumer. So each step in that flow of energy through an ecosystem is known as a trophic level. So as energy moves from one trophic level to the next, most of the useful energy, 90% of that energy, is lost as heat. And this is because of the second law of thermodynamics, which is that when energy changes form, some of it has to be lost as not useful energy, which in this case is heat. So because it's difficult to measure the amount of energy contained in each trophic level, biomass, which is the weight of living material, is often used as a proxy because you can only be a living thing if you're getting energy. So we can see how much energy is available at each trophic level by measuring how much living things are at each trophic level. So this is our, this is one way to look at it. It's a little upside down in the way that it feels to me. But this big green box right here is our producers, bacteria, algae, plants. They're getting solar energy. This has tons of energy. So then we go down to herbivores. 90% of that energy is lost as heat. Only 10% makes it to herbivores. That means if there's 100 whatever of plants, there's only 10 herbivores. And for those 10 herbivores, there's only going to be 10% of that for primary carnivores, which would be 1. And then secondary carnivores, 0.1. Only 10% makes it to that next level. Most is lost as heat. This is the way that usually clicks for me a little bit easier. So the base of all ecosystems is going to be those producers. 10% or 90% is going to be lost as heat. And then 10% makes it up to herbivores. 10% of that makes it to carnivores. 10% of that makes it to the next. So we have our producers, primary consumer, secondary consumer, and our tertiary consumer. And then decomposers, because of how they eat, are their own little triangle over to the side. All right, the last thing we want to cover here is food chains and food webs. So we had a little bit of a food chain here, but a food chain is a series of organisms occupying different trophic levels through which energy passes as a result of one organism consuming another. A food web is a series of multiple overlapping food chains. So a chain means we can follow one specific thing to one specific thing to one specific. It's a chain. It's one continuous line. A food web is not that thing. So a food web should have tons of arrows going different directions, showing the flow of energy. So if you were to draw a food web, and I said in the instructions, a deer eats leaves, you would draw leaves, and you would have an arrow pointing from the leaves to the deer, because the energy is flowing from the leaves to the deer. All right, that is the end of this lesson. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next one.